I'm here today with Kati Rán to talk about her latest release, SÁLA. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, but if I'm not, let me
Yes.
know. I struggle with some of these words on this record. Coming out May
Yeah,
4th on Svart Records. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's actually pronounced Saula, like
Oh,
with an
SÁLA.
owl. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was almost there. So it's a
Well, you're
lot.
being generous. It was not even close, but you're being generous, and I appreciate that. So let's talk about this record. When you perhaps now have an opportunity to look back and step away from it, I know it's hard because it's still fresh and the album is coming out on the 24th. uh what does this album truly represent to you?
Well, it's interesting because it's usually also during the album creation process where it takes a little while before also the artist can see what is actually the main thread here that's running through this record. Because I approached each song pretty individually as a means to set really a certain thematic per track. But I think overall the album is really about overcoming hardships in life and finding strength in also, I would say, ancestral wisdom from the past. Historical sources also can share similar narratives that we still see today and can be relevant for also the narrative of our own life. And so I would say the whole album is sort of a journey of sorts, a treasure hunt actually for those moments where you have found a kernel of wisdom or have processed a certain emotion or obstacle, whether it be heartbreak, anger, illness, all of the sort of darker things that we can encounter in life, mental health issues or depression, and find some wisdom. And I use also my music as a catalyst of sorts to alchemize and process these things into art. So I think that's also what the album is about. And I have to add to that, I really took it from a feminine perspective. So if we look at it a little bit less personally, it's for me also very much to shed a little bit more light on the female perspective in history and mythology and the present time.
Well, there's a reason why we call Earth Mother Earth, not Father Earth. So
Mm.
it plays really well into the sound and into the overall atmosphere that you created on the album. You mentioned creating the songs individually, and
Mm.
sometimes during the process, taking a look and seeing what kind of brings it together. When you're creating these songs, at what point in time do you start to see that thread develop? Because when you're focusing on an individual track, it's kind of hard to see what the next track is even going to be. So at
Yeah.
what point does the puzzle start to become a little bit more clear for you?
Well, of course they are brought together because the thematics that I've chosen are these nine daughters of Ran, this mythological Nordic ocean goddess. And in old historic sources from the north, we see that there's a description. She has nine daughters. They all have individual names. And even when I approached it song by song, I already had tied those individual nine daughters per different weather states that we can encounter at sea or in nature, and also different emotional states of the human experience here on Earth. And so, of course, what binds them together is that that is a whole. Like we as humans are not only always happy, we can have stormy thoughts, we can have, calmer, cooler moments. We can have moments where we are overcome with grief and are in stillness. So that already binds it together, like thematically, and also I would say just for the emotional landscape that we all have as peoples.
Considering that as the backdrop, do you do a lot of research before you even start to write the songs when it comes to those themes in order to maybe keep them as close to the original storylines as possible?
Yeah, I do. I actually also worked with some linguistics from Bergen University, also for making use of these old languages, of course. So for me, the research, it's really important to have as a foundation of sorts for these songs, and to say, okay, I think I found everything there is, from different angles, different time periods even, or regions. So my album isn't based on one particular saga or one particular story, but really the body of Nordic literature. And to say, okay, maybe we can expand it a little, look also at what is happening in other cultures, find cross-cultural references, and sort of lift it up to something that is applicable and inspirational worldwide, even if you're not necessarily really deep into Nordic mythology or literature, then I hope still the album to feel very relevant and in a way relating to the listener, because human emotion and navigating, life, I think that's relevant for anyone, no matter if it's framed with this Nordic cosmos. But yes, it's a passion of mine. I love to collect old books. Go to antiquarians and ask for if they have like the first prints or anything I
Oh
can
wow.
afford. Yeah, I really really love that, and I have to also compliment people from the academics here, friends that I've had conversations with or talked with or had even philosophical discussions with. And yeah, just for me that's definitely sort of the background of the poetry that I've shaped with it. And I think also you can sort of see the level of interest here, a personal interest or a little mini obsession, is by also attempting to actually recreate new song lyrics based on old skaldic literature. So to say, how was the rhyme meter in that time? What type of way of writing did those ancient skalds did from the past, and can we attempt to play with that material or even recreate some of it, but then from the present time?
When you look at the process of making this record, was it as much, or how much of it was it really draining, and how much of it was liberating from your standpoint?
Well, I think all of it is, for me, it's a process of course, having the interest in the topic. So that's definitely not draining. This is something I would anyhow do in my spare time, is to read in these old historic books or even occult resources or like that. That's for me is a personal joy and pleasure to undertake. And so that's not draining. But you could say, of course, with the background of the album being very an emotional one, life itself has had its ups and downs, and I use my art as a way to alchemize that and to say, let's find something beautiful even in moments of heartbreak. And of course it's a bit rough to say, but the artist usually flourishes when they are not too happy, because that's the moment where they can pour their heart out in a soul and sing about heartbreak. It's usually when we are most happy that we are the least creative. So in that sense, I take it as it comes and try to find the balance in all of this.
It's so true. It's so true. I don't think anybody's ever created an epic song or a painting by sitting on a beach drinking coconut juice and looking at the sunset.
Yeah,
I just don't correlate those two things together.
no,
Normally,
no.
normally
And
pain, suffering, heartache, it's really what brings the juices of creativity to the forefront.
yeah, and humans and artists especially, we are such emotional creatures of sorts. Like we're so sensitive, and I think it's because our senses are a little bit on the outside of our skin and perception, that we feel so deeply. And I think that's well, also generally speaking, is where great art stems from, is when we can give a voice to those thoughts that anyone really can unfortunately recognize themselves also in, and connect it to this song. Like if I sing about, if I use the word you in a song, like in Heming Leva, I see only you. Maybe for me, I have a person in mind that's dear to me, but of course the listener will think of their own person. But I also think that's the beauty of art and music in general, is that it can become your personal song as well that way. And I think also with my album, I really try, even in my lyric crafting and all the history and mythology sources, I really try to make it accessible to anyone and to, yeah, find some home in that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you worked with a lot of different artists on this record. You had a lot of different collaborations on this album. Was there any criteria for you to pick who you wanted to work with, or it was just a matter of bringing people that you admire that are close to you to participate on this record?
I'm actually quite also as producer of the record, quite picky. So for me, it really needs to make sense to add on a guest vocalist or instrumentalist. But of course, when I write or pre-produce a song, sometimes we lay down, for example, specific instrument like a double bass or some strings that, of course, in the prior most early form of the song, that would be a synthetic plugin. But then I will always look for a player who can really recreate that on their instrument if I don't play it myself. And but also a person who sort of gets it and who really their energy and their instrument sort of adds onto this album. And this is also why I feel very blessed and lucky that some of the people that I've asked sort of during the curation of that soundscape, that they said yes. For instance, Carl Sagan, a Norwegian jazz and folk musician who is known for his goat horns, the bukkehorn. And I personally love his sound, and he's such a master of it, like really the person who brought it back to contemporary music today. So to have him open and close this album, it's not only about um, the sound, even though I know I'm working with a master on this specific instrument, but also it's paying tribute to that legacy, to say, okay, this is really someone who carries this cultural tradition. So it makes sense if I, as a non-native, make an album that also pays tribute to these northern hemispheres, that of course I will invite the people in who can best embody that. And yeah, so for it's not necessarily about the name, but really the energy or the thing they carry onto the album. And to even further expand on that, the same in Iceland. Like I took quite some effort to make recordings in Iceland with Borgar Magnusson, originally on Unar, double contrabass player, because he just gets it. He gets that Icelandic cultish folk sounds. So if I listen to that a lot privately and I'm inspired by that as an artist, and I think, okay, I'm working with Icelandic heritage material, of course, who better to ask than someone who also really carries that tradition and has worked with all the best, yeah, Björk, Sigur Rós. Like to have a person like that is sort of like having Iceland on the record for me. And so I'm just very grateful how it all turned out. And yeah.
Yeah, and then in the mix of all of this, I see Mitch Harris from Napalm Death, and I was like, well, that one is not like the others. What
No,
what
no,
happened? What happened
that's a
there?
unicorn. Yeah, that's serendipity. That's the universe that throws something at you in the middle of creation process, and it's up to you to catch it. Because yeah, originally Mitch wrote me because and this is still relevant actually. He wrote me because he thought, Kati, I want to do a music project with you. Let's start something weird and new. And I was like, that's cool. But I also haven't had met him personally yet. And I always really want to feel out if that energy clicks with me creatively. And then I was in the middle of making Stone Pillars, one of the English songs on Sola, this album, with Jani Peu together, my Finnish producer. We co-produced this record together. And we were like, let's try it out. Let's just send him the song and see what happens with Mitch. What happens if he's creatively working with some material of yours? And I was completely blank about it. I was just looking forward to hear what he would bring back. Maybe thinking, it might be screaming punk metal vocals, like. But man, this is so beautiful. Then he delivered the most amazing vocal harmony that perfectly fitted. It was just supposed to be. And so we even expanded on that with him. And yeah, it's been a great first collaboration with him. So who knows what's next there. But it was definitely an unexpected thing for the album. And I'm kind of happy that because I always describe this album as a journey and a treasure hunt of sorts to find that inner strength and inner treasure in yourself. I really like it that the universe, in my perspective, throws you that curveball, and that we were able to bring him onto the record at the last minute.
Definitely a unicorn when it comes to the guests on the album. You mentioned the emotional side of the record and your own emotional side when you bring yourself into these songs. How much does that emotional side affect the vocal performance on an album like this that has that emotional backdrop to it?
Yeah. Well, it has its effects because actually, when I'm recording, I always want to bring myself in the state of mind of the song. Like, of course, we do vocal warm-ups or things like that, a little technical. But mainly for me, it's really about being in that sphere, being in that mood to be able to really catalyze those emotions and let them out during the recording. And so it affected this record in the sense that we didn't always choose the perfect take. We took the one where I was most in that state, most fragile. And there's some moments on the records where I think you can hear that because of the voice, because it's like it breaks a little during, you know, that feeling when you choke up a little when you're about to cry. So there is that little like kernel there in your throat, but I think it adds beauty to it because people can feel it's real. And I think that way, if we look at sound as vibration and frequency, and the voice as an extension of your soul, then that way it can really transmit through the song the emotion. You know, even if people maybe not understand the lyrics because they're in an old Nordic tongue, at least they will feel the emotion in your voice, and that resonates. And so for me it's actually a very essential thing in making music, and something I've had to learn as a producer myself, to not always want to make everything pitch perfectly polished, because I think that's something especially producers will recognize it's something you can easily fall into because it's safe, it's pitch perfect, but then it loses something of its authenticity. And same on other tracks where I'm really kind of pissed off. I just decided to keep the rasp. You know, the you can I think you can almost hear the spit on the microphone. Maybe not completely, but you know, it's there, and that's okay. It's part of this record, and it's been really fun to do a lot of different vocal technique and ranges to show those different emotions as well.
Yeah, for me personally, for someone who obviously doesn't understand the lyrics completely from beginning to end of the record, having that emotional aspect, part of the
Mm,
song, part of the delivery, while I may not understand the lyrics, I understand the emotion of the
yeah,
song. So it allows me to connect with a different piece of what the
yeah.
music is all about. You're not connecting with the lyrics, but you're connecting with how the whole experience makes you feel. And artists always say that their voice is their instrument, but I don't think in any record it's more true than on this one. Your voice is really an instrument throughout the whole record. How do you manage and how do you take care of that instrument throughout the process of making an album like this?
Well, I don't really have any special routines yet. Maybe I should start to do that, especially if we're looking into perhaps going live with this album. But I do have to add to this question that I was very happy that I had a very personal, close contact with my co-producer, Yanni Pale. And he is one of those people who also really has mastered the voice as an instrument. He is himself a male falsetto singer and has really like the broadest range in the voice. And so he has been a really incredible vocal coach as well during the recordings. And I've learned that makes a big difference. Besides, really embodying it and bringing yourself in that state of mind and having the atmosphere around the song recording process uh, really like made comfortable for the artist. It is also important what your relation is to your producer in the room or your audio engineer or whoever is there in the room with you, to feel really safe, to be able to be vulnerable, to know you can make any kind of sound, and no matter what, I will be safe, I will be okay. So here I have to bring that also back to having A&P there with me during the recording process last 1.5 years.
You mentioned taking some of these songs live. Is that something that's in your back pocket, something that you're thinking, maybe performing the album from start to finish to have that whole, story come to light
Yeah.
in one sitting, if you will?
Well, as you mentioned, there's some guests on here. So if we are looking into that, it would almost become like a musical saga of the North of some sorts. So it would be a bigger production. It's not something that is undiscussed at the moment because it's so beautiful to see how high the interest actually is for this. So that's something we can look onto next if it's actually possible to bring an album as SÁLA onto stage. But I've done some bigger things before.
Hmm.
I was once in the background doing management for Heilung's debut show, Lifa. So I do know how a bigger production looks like from the ground up. So who knows? But it would be a special thing, a bigger thing.
For sure. At least, I mean, I think it's probably more doable to do it as a one-time event, maybe versus multiple times, considering all the moving pieces.
Mhm.
But something that fans would appreciate, that is for sure. And more as a fan now is what I would like to ask you. When you look at some of the songs on this record, not as the creator, not as the artist, but as a fan, which song as a fan do you connect with the most?
Hmm. It's a difficult question because all of these 9 waves, they are my daughters of sorts. They are my babies. But I have to say that I was personally very excited about actually the first soft release we did of this album, which was the very first single from February in English called Stone Pillars. Precisely because that song, also placed on the middle of the album, feels very much like the heart of the album. If I would compare it to tarot cards, which I sometimes do on these records for myself, it would be the Three of Swords, and anyone who's into the subject of tarot knows, like, oh, that's the moment where the heart hurts. But as we discussed earlier, it's also the moment where art really starts to shine, the power of art to heal. And so, yeah, that song is very special for me. But there's so many others actually that have an important meaning for me and hopefully later for everyone else.
Yeah, I'm sure it's difficult for you to separate yourself, the artist and the listener, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, when you press play, you're still listening with the artist ears. So I think that
Yeah.
probably
And
becomes
mainly producer ears now. That's also a problem where you're like, is that panning correct? And what's the automation of layer 147 all right? So that's a bit ruined, but yeah, but no,
yeah.
I enjoy actually listening to
That's
my
when you
own
start to get too
voice.
much into the weeds and start to dig deeper and deeper, and then next thing you know, you're like you said, layer 185, and
Yeah.
let's go with that. Kati, thank you very much for your time today. I really
All
appreciate
right.
talking to you, especially after listening to this album. Incredible record that you put together, a
Thank you.
very emotional journey, one that was an absolute pleasure to listen to, and it would be an absolute pleasure to see it come to life, because I think
Thank
this is like almost like an audio book. At least that
you.
was my experience listening to it. It felt like an audio book. So if you could bring that audio book into life, into representation, I think you would give so much more depth to the work that you already achieved on the record, and it would be absolutely beautiful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been really nice to be here. So yeah, we'll see us again.
I hope so. I hope so. Don't
Yeah.
be a stranger. Thank you very much for
No.
your time. I really appreciate it. Have a
Yeah.
fun day, and
Thank
don't
you.
work too hard. Take a little bit of a break and give yourself a moment to enjoy the moment. Take a moment to enjoy
Yes.
the moment.
Well, this week for sure. It's a very celebratory week. So yeah. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
no problem. My pleasure. All the best.
Bye. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.